You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. You're listening to First Contact, a podcast about Star Trek The Next Generation that sometimes even we wonder why we're making it. I'm Andrew.
I'm James. I'm pretty sure the gong doesn't return in future Lwaxana Troi episodes. I'm happy about that fact.
This week we've watched Manhunt. It was written by Terry Devereaux and directed by Rob Bowman. It first aired the week of June 19th, 1989. James, tell me all about this one.
The Enterprise is on a mission to deliver Antedean delegates to a conference where Lwaxana Troi arrives on board ship. She's experiencing the Betazoid version of the menopause, meaning her sex drive is increased. Upon realising he's the object of her affections, Picard decides to hide on the holodeck. Then they arrive at the conference and everyone realises that not much has happened, so Lwaxana uncovers the Antedean delegates as assassins.
Well, I'm not sure what to say about this episode, but I've seen it many times before. Always on the rewatch pile as this one. Alex, this is your first time watch. What did you think?
Why? Yeah, why? Yeah.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened in this episode.
That is the thing about this episode, and usually we say when there's a bad episode, we have so much to talk about, and it's generally more difficult to talk about the good episodes because there's really, not too much to criticise, and it is the negative that brings out the best in us. But with this one, it's not just like it was bad, because I don't even think I could describe it as bad. It was just so inconsequential. There's no plots. There's nothing. Some people are in some places.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Nothing happens, really, but yet it's just about amusing enough to stay off of the side of being terrible.
I don't hate it in any way, actually. I think the Lwaxana Troi episodes have quite a bad rep, and this is a vehicle for her character. There's no getting away from that, really. That's fine, but let's go through this in great detail, because that's what we do. Start at the very beginning, when the Antedean delegates are beamed on board the ship. What did you think of these characters, this alien race? Something a bit different?
I thought it's a good time to be a shit rubber mask maker.
Hey, they'll get a lot of work next week as well.
They were quite terrible. I mean, there's not a lot else to say. I mean, aside from the way their plotline wraps up, which is really, really quite something. They're utterly inconsequential to anything else that happens, unless you like barrels of fish.
Is there a sentence you ever imagined yourself saying?
In some ways, I think they're there as a joke, and perhaps even their appearance is deliberately quite rubbish. So Picard gets dressed up in his full dress uniform, and I'm not sure dress uniform means actually wearing a dress.
It's the suspenders I don't understand.
That seems to be the note that the costume department got. Okay, so he goes to greet people who are in suspended animation, and they also get sent a bucket of fish. So there's no need for really anyone to be there. Why were they not beamed directly to sickbay?
So the Worf can be there and have his hilarious joke where he thinks that they're attractive. Ha ha ha, it's funny because he's ugly.
It's exactly the same joke they made in Times Squared when Riker is making the omelettes, and they're disgusting and everyone hates them, but Worf likes them because he's an alien. And Worf thinks these strange-looking fish creatures are handsome because he's an alien. Let's laugh at Worf because he's different.
And to be fair, they do highlight that by having him talk to Wesley and put him in his place.
In the Federation, in this period, when there are thousands of populated worlds and so many different species and races, should being surprised at the look of a particular alien race really be something that's considered at all? I think this is poor 80s writing being projected onto the 24th century, and I'm not having it.
I'm just going to settle for it's just bad.
Oh, okay then.
Let's be honest. The parts that save the episode are the jokes. It's not any deep message.
I suppose not. Then, of course, the Enterprise is graced by Lwaxana Troi, who's also going to this conference because it seems the Enterprise is just a taxi service? Is that what it does? I don't know. They chart clusters and sometimes deliver delegates to places. So she's allowed to basically come on board, and another funny transporter room scene. Mr. Holm comes and she wants Picard to lift her bag, but then Riker has to lift her bag, and her bag is very heavy.
He does the worst "this thing is heavy" acting that I have ever seen.
As I say, the jokes save the episode. The jokes save it.
This isn't particularly funny, though, is it?
Are they aiming for broad farce? A comedy of manners, almost an Ealing comedy style episode, you know, where you've got lots of people misunderstanding what's going on, but they don't actually have the time to write that or the nuance.
I can't decide if they're doing that or if they're just genuinely incompetent. Because the track record isn't good, is it?
I mean, I do appreciate them trying to do something different, but is it really the right time, considering the massive problems they have with the writing staff and the writers' strike, to try something like this?
Yeah, I appreciate them doing something different. I don't mind an individual episode trying something new within the show. It's got a very flexible format. You can do pretty much anything you want to do.
And they do comedies successfully later on in Next Generation and in Deep Space Nine, Voyager.
To its credit, it doesn't go through any dreadful tonal shifts like other episodes have suffered from. It does stay consistently in this broad, farcical sort of tone, but it misses the mark with that. But at least tonally it's consistent throughout the entire episode. It's not like Up the Long Ladder, which is making some serious point about abortion 1 minute and then having comedy Irish people. At least it's just consistently a bit rubbish. And this episode is also a comedy written by people who aren't funny.
Well, we'd know a lot about that.
It's then revealed she's going through the phase, which is essentially the menopause. Did we think, we really need a menopause episode in Star Trek The Next Generation? That's what it's been missing. I think we really need to tackle this head on, but in a light-hearted way. I don't know what the meeting was that resulted in this episode. I suppose it was Gene saying, write an episode with my wife in it. Go on, do it.
Get her out the house. I'll be busy from 3 till 5.
I'm doing some wardrobe testing.
I'm just waiting for the next series when we get Riker's erectile dysfunction episode. Will it stand up with the rest of the series?
I'm not saying we shouldn't address these issues, and television's often been accused of only targeting the youth market. It's just that they don't really do anything with it. And I would argue that actually they do a much better Lwaxana Troi episode later on that deals with a broadly similar issue, but in a dramatic way.
Well, I mean, it's just so out of place, isn't it? I mean, the whole fast nature of this, we've had comedic things before now, but we've never had a whole episode to this extent. It just feels totally different. Like you're watching something else. You know, it's got the same characters, but I feel like I'm watching some BBC One Friday night 7:00 comedy, like My Family, about, oh look, here comes my my aunt. She's had the menopause now. She's massively horny, and she spends half an hour chasing around the cuckolded husband.
The thing is, I don't mind them changing the tone, and with the nature of Star Trek, certainly at this time, they were only going for single episodes. You know, that's what they were told by Paramount. They were told they had to make it because they were making it straight for syndication. It had to be single episodes, so they had to work on their own, which is why they couldn't do continuing stories. And I don't mind them changing the tone between episodes like this and doing an entire episode which is a bit weird, and as I've said, they do it much better later on, and better in Voyager and Deep Space Nine, much better in Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah, I'm not against them doing it. I think it stands out particularly here because they haven't until this point. You know, there's just been touches of it before. There's never been, well, an episode where it's in place of the plot.
But I think the problem is they just do it very badly. That's the issue. If we enjoyed it and we thought it was very funny, we wouldn't mind, and we wouldn't even point out the shift in tone.
Yeah, I mean, it's already highlighted by the fact that, you know, we haven't had it before, so when it's not great, it really stands out a long way.
Which brings us to one of the big set pieces of the episode.
There's a big set piece of the episode.
Which brings us to one of the small set pieces of the episode, where Picard thinks all the senior staff have received an invitation to dinner, and he keeps commenting to them, "Ah, Dr. Pulaski, are you not joining us? I've already eaten, thanks." And then it turns out she's just invited him, and it's a date. I thought the joke here was quite good. Picard brings the bottle, and Mr. Holm downs it. That's quite a good gag. That's quite amusing. And Picard's reaction to it, equally so.
I didn't realise that this is what you meant by the set piece, and I thought you meant something much later, and now I've depressed myself with realising how much more there is still to go through.
Hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this properly. And that means going to dinner with Lwaxana Troi.
I did find that sequence amusing. You know, Picard going around saying, "Oh, are you going to the party tonight?" And that was kind of amusing. It kind of worked. It wouldn't have seemed out of place if the rest of the episode was good.
It was fine, wasn't it? But it's the sort of thing that might be a B plot in another episode. So you watched it, and it's enjoyable enough, and the whole thing with bringing Data in to try and get out of being there and whatnot, that's all fun and enjoyable enough, and there's some good laughs to be had. But you just sort of feel, well, when's it getting going? And then you realise, oh no, this is it.
So much so that Picard at this point realises he is the object of her affections, and she's hunting for a husband. So he essentially decides to take the rest of the episode off. He has a meeting with his crew where they discuss the menopause with her daughter and Riker, and it's revealed the sex drive increases up to 4 times. And Riker likes that.
Not up to 4 times. More, possibly.
More. More than 4 times. I don't know what that means, to be honest. I don't know how sex drive is measured.
Yeah, I was wondering that as well. They have lots of wonderful measures in the future. You know, what's warp drive? You know, what's that a measurement of? Sex drive. What's that a measurement of?
Can you power a ship on sex drive?
Riker's tried.
I mean, I don't want to think about how you insert the fuel into a sex drive powered ship. Do you need it manned all the time?
That's why Data needs to be enabled for sex, you see.
Just the strain on your thighs. Mercy.
Oh dear me. I've missed recording this show, you know that. Picard then decides, well, I better make myself scarce and not throw himself into any kind of duties, but just go to the holodeck and not to embark on any kind of interesting diversion on the holodeck. Go to the holodeck to sit in various places. Go to the holodeck to essentially do nothing. You have the whole world open to you there. You can go anywhere in the universe, essentially. We've seen plenty of places visited, but he goes and wants to do a Dixon Hill novel. That's what Picard loves, although he seems massively unfamiliar with it every time he goes in. And surprised by all these things in this novel that he apparently adores. Oh yes, this. Ah, amazing. Automobiles.
I may be wrong, but please God tell me that only exists in the script because the set was already standing. Although it wouldn't be, would it? Because it's another series. It was last in series 1. Jesus Christ, in which case that's even worse.
Well, this episode received some major rewrites, and Tracy Tormey, in fact, wrote the episode, a rather fine writer at times, and refused to have their name on it. So that's why Terry Devereaux, who doesn't exist, wrote this episode, because they protested. They wanted it to be a pretty strong Dixon Hill show and learn a bit more about that world, and also have Lwaxana Troi, but apparently it ended up a completely unrecognisable script. But yeah, he goes in and he sits. He doesn't want to be bothered, and then he keeps getting bothered by, you know, elements of the novels, and then he wants to go and sit in a bar elsewhere where he won't get bothered. And I suppose in some ways he goes on a date with Madeline, Dixon Hill's secretary. That might be a diversion, but why could he not have done this in his quarters? Like, why did he want to go and have some peace and quiet in a gangster novel, essentially, or a film noir?
I can't even work up the enthusiasm to think of an amusing reason anymore.
Because they wanted Lwaxana Troi to fall in love with a hologram for one small section of the episode.
The only reason Dixon Hill is in there is because it was in the last series, and they thought, hey, that worked, let's bung it back in. I assume, but I'm fairly certain that my assumption is right.
Again, I suppose this is the B plot. But there's no plot, once again. It's literally Picard going and sitting somewhere. That's what it is.
You can't have a B plot if you don't have an A plot.
We talked a bit when we do another podcast on Red Dwarf, and there's an episode titled Dear Dave, which was supposed to be an episode about a day when nothing happens. And is that this? Is when nothing happens on the ship, but then they lost courage and decided to add in things, which are also nothing happening, but nothing happening in a way where you might think something's actually happening?
They actually kind of do that in a later Next Generation episode, don't they? Data's Day.
This isn't even that, is it? It's just... It's lots of nothing purporting to be something. And that's frustrating.
Again, a topic we know all too much about.
But let's move on. Let's move on with the episode.
Oh God, there's more!
Oh, there's lots more! In the meantime, while Picard's doing this, Lwaxana Troi decides to announce to everyone she's engaged to Riker, because she just walks up to him and says, "I'll have that," and gets engaged to Riker. And, you know, in the meantime, she's also chatted up Wesley and Worf.
Why is it that every time there's a hint of somebody chatting up Worf, or a woman being attracted to Worf, that he has to make a comment on how humans can't handle his sexual prowess?
Because we all need to know about Worf's giant barbed penis. So she tries to chat up all the men that happen to be there. And she mentions she's going to see Geordi. She makes some gesture to her eyes. I don't know what that means, though. But he's not in this episode. That's how little he matters.
He's probably off with Sonia Gomez, having another hilarious adventure.
Yeah, so she tries to seduce the entire crew, and then she joins them on the holodeck and falls in love with the holodeck barman, because she can't read him, because she's a psychic, although in this episode she's a rubbish psychic, because, you know, hormones. The door of the holodeck has a big sign saying holodeck on it, but she doesn't know it's a holodeck when she's talking to the hologram character. Yeah, what can you say about this scene? It's there. That scene is definitely there. Alex, did you think it was there?
I thought it was very much there. I thought it was present. I thought it existed in between a point of the previous scene and the next, and it is definitely something that took place.
And also, the other thing that took place was a Dr. Pulaski scene with the Antedeans waking up and wanting fish, and Worf sticking his hands in the fish, and then them eating the fish.
That's no way to talk about Dr. Pulaski. Oh, you mean the barrel.
The barrel.
That's no way to talk about Dr. Pulaski.
Let's get to the end of the episode then, which is them preparing to beam down to the planet, the Antedeans, for this conference, this really important conference, which I think could grant them membership of the Federation, but who cares? But then it's revealed, because Lwaxana Troi is a psychic, that they're assassins, and they were going to blow up the entire conference. How did you feel that fitted in? It ties every aspect of the episode together, doesn't it?
I'm going to be honest. I had stopped paying attention at this point, and I have no memory of this taking place.
Oh.
The last thing I remember is the bar and then the end credits. I think I checked my emails.
James?
So the Antedeans they were basically fitted up to be bombs, and they just kind of walk them away, even though they're walking bombs.
Also, I'm slightly bothered by the transporter. It's not really detectable by your scanners. Okay, fine. But then they press a button and they say, yeah, he's covered in it. Why is that omitted in regular scans, say?
Well, I mean, we saw all the fish and we just thought, why bother?
But it doesn't matter because it's comedy, and comedy doesn't need rules.
Plus, of course, we'd already established in this episode that Lwaxana Troi's psychic powers leave a lot to be desired, certainly at this time, and she uses them at the end.
The scope of them, whereas, Troi can sense people on planets and on ships, but maybe only if they're on the view screen, whereas Lwaxana Troi has to ask the computer where Captain Picard is, and she's meant to be 10 times more powerful. What's that all about, eh?
And then there's that weird transporter effect where Lwaxana's leaving, but she's saying that Picard has dirty thoughts. Which was quite scary, really.
There's no more to say, except that there is in Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Mick Fleetwood.
I knew this was coming.
Mick Fleetwood is one of the Antedeans, Mick Fleetwood gets to lie stationary, covered in rubber, for the majority of the episode. What a wonderful use of a Star Trek fan guest star. I bet he was glad he turned up that week to get caked in prosthetics and have to do nothing except shove fish in his face. What a marvellous experience that must have been. People will say to him, "Hey Mick, weren't you in Star Trek?" "Yeah, let me show you this. This is me in Star Trek." I'm so proud of this episode. I'm so proud I was there. I'm so glad I'm a fan. And I'm so glad they look after their fans. Mick Fleetwood, there he was in Star Trek. Marvellous. Absolutely marvellous.
I thought it was just very nice of them to recreate so accurately his life on the road. The rubber masks, the fish in a barrel. Wonderfully accurate. I mean, it's got to be bollocks, hasn't it? I mean, surely that's not actually Mick Fleetwood.
There are pictures of him being fitted with the mask.
No, I thought Peter Green was the one that lost his marbles. So I've got a quote here from the director Rob Bowman, where he says, "I thought this episode came out just fine, although we did have some funky problems." Now, in what sense is he using the word funky there? Is it the smell? I mean, it's possible because of all those fish. Or did he have some problems relating to the funk of the show? Did he feel that it could have benefited from the introduction of George Clinton and some funky bass lines? So ultimately, the episode came out just fine, but it wasn't funkadelic.
This is the first appearance of Robert O'Reilly, who will go on to play Gowron in both Star Trek Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and lots of other aliens along the way as well. He plays the Scarface guy who threatens Picard in Dixon Hill. But I remember him best as Captain Kavok from the Star Trek The Next Generation VHS interactive board game. Every time he came on screen, you had to hit your comm badge and say, "Yes, Captain Kavok." And I made some of my friends play this game with me. And after that, they weren't my friends anymore.
Referring to the Nitpicker's Guide for Next Generation Trekkers, one of the, well, as many as 4 books that we may refer to for this podcast, I noticed the quote, "While on the prowl for Picard, Lwaxana invites him to dinner, calling it an official function. Picard, in dress uniform, arrives thinking the rest of the senior staff will be there. Instead, Lwaxana has prepared an intimate dinner for 2. The table that Picard and she dine at is very impractical. There's no way to sit at it without straddling its legs. A subliminal message that Mrs. Troi is trying to get across." Really? Having gone away and consulted some books, we can now see from photographic evidence that it was indeed Mick Fleetwood under the mask. We even have a quote here from makeup man Alan Apone, where he says, "I ran into Mick only a couple of years ago. So I reintroduced myself as the Star Trek makeup man, and he said, 'Oh my God, was that not just the most fun time?'" He spent his day in a rubber mask with fish in a barrel. I mean, I suppose anything's a step up from Sam Fox, but Jesus.
Quite a nice little scene where you have Lwaxana Troi talking to the computer, and that is actually Majel Barrett talking to herself. She, of course, plays the computer on everything from Star Trek The Next Generation right through to Voyager, and once again in Star Trek 2009. So, you know, that's maybe a neat Easter egg. Not enough to make you want to watch the episode, though. Originally, there was a lot more to the Dixon Hill side of the episode. It was a specific book called The Long Dark Tunnel, which was based on Farewell My Lovely, just as The Big Goodbye was based on The Maltese Falcon. Writer Tracy Tormey went as far as to write gritty Chandler-esque voiceovers for Picard to deliver, but people higher up the food chain thought that might confuse people with the captain's log, because all the audience are apparently idiots. Of the episode, Tracy Tormey had to say. I was desperate. I went to Jean. It really got to me. The Royale I just shrugged off, but they were just mutilating Manhunt, and once again I thought maybe with Jean stepping in, he could save it. But he was out of the picture, and everything would have to go through Maury, and he didn't want to hear it. The Dixon Hill stuff was a complete turkey. The Troi stuff worked okay. I took my name off because I didn't want people thinking I wrote that. Well, if you've recently watched Manhunt, we're sorry. We are so sorry. We will be back very soon, and we will be talking all about... We'll be back very soon, where we'll be talking all about the emissary. So we hope you'll join us now. Now, do you know how distracting that gong is? It's very distracting. Join us again next time when we'll be talking about the emissary. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
He's probably off with Sonia Gomez, having another hilarious adventure.
Oh man, he's drinking some hot chocolate, but he didn't mean to, but she just poured it in his face.
Also, that's where Lwaxana's chest is from the last episode. That screaming face. Presumably screaming because it's full of boiling hot chocolate. With just hot chocolate coming out of the tear ducts.
When you said Lwaxana's chest, I thought you meant something else.
Look, we've been over this so many times before. You cannot fill breasts with hot chocolate. They don't work like hot water bottles.
Why would you fill a hot water bottle with hot chocolate?